Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans. So, right at the beginning of September now, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the fairy tale English landscape that I think inspires myth and magic and has inspired fantasy fiction authors over the years. And also want to touch on the idea that perhaps your own landscape in your own natural environment should be inspiring and influencing your own fiction. And I'm going to bring you up to date with some brand new archaeology, so we'll talk about that as well. And then we're going to discuss being an irresponsible artist. I want you to think about being an irresponsible artist. And I want you to think about goofing things up a little bit. So goof things up a little bit and think like a monkey and be irresponsible. But first let's talk about the English landscape. The English landscape which I think inspires myth and magic. Now you'll know that if you're a regular visitor to the Myth and Magic show that I regularly state that as an English author I am blessed to live in a real life fairyland. For example, I remind you that we, the people of this ancient kingdom, are subjects. We're not really citizens like you, perhaps. That's because our 1,000-year-old government, the military, the courts, and all our institutions take their power from a true queen who lives in a fairy tale castle, just 20 minutes away from where I'm speaking to you from here. Near that castle, like I say, close to where I live, and it's along a road called the Devil's Highway, alongside a supernatural river in which a water deity resides. Near that castle there's a real-life Hogwarts-type boarding school where boy pupils, they're always boys, but boy pupils dress in towel coats and they belong to ancient houses. And one day these little guys will become prime ministers and kings and emperors of their own kingdoms. But for now, these little guys are taking lessons in their tailcoats in medieval hallways that are clustered around a chapel that houses various magical items, including, for example, and this is just one, a fragment of the crown of thorns. This is all real. I'm not making this up. This is exactly what you can see if you come to visit me and this area today. And literally here in my hometown, canny visitors will find a shamanic tree. It's a sacred tree that offers pilgrims a place of interaction between our own world here and the spirit world. And it does that by offering a link between consciousnesses. Yes. So my English fairy tale landscape is littered with dreamland, wonderland castles, and there are at least 4,000 castles in England alone. In fact, there are so many we don't even know if that's the right number. We guess it's around about 4,000, it could be more. And another 1,000 stone circles, and once again that's a conservative estimate, there's probably more. And these stone circles, by the way, date back to about 5,000 years. And beside the castles and beside the stone circles, there are countless other burial mounds and earthworks which go back even further. And my opinion is that this landscape, this English landscape, this fairy tale English landscape, has inspired storytellers and myth makers across countless generations. And I believe the realm in which he or she lives will emotionally awaken an author's mood and an author's context and her or his mental imagery. So it's great to bring you news this week of a recent archaeological report about a mysterious ancient monument that's known as Arthur's Stone. Not to be confused with Arthur's Saddle. This is Arthur's Stone, and it's in a place called Herefordshire. because this week that monument has been redated. It appears to be older, quite a lot older, than our most famous prehistoric site of Stonehenge. Now, after much study, it's been accepted by archaeologists that Arthur's Stone is probably part of a much larger monumental ceremonial landscape that existed in England 6,000 years ago. In other words, Arthur's Stone and the other stones around it, and this scenery itself, was ornamented and adorned by humans before the other prehistoric attention-getting milestones, such as the invention of the wheel and the use of mummification and the beginnings of any writing system, and before Troy was founded, and before Sumerians established a city, and even before the Aboriginal Australians completed their first ever engravings. This is extremely old and an interesting discovery. According to Live Science, Arthur's Stone, and I've put a picture on my site at www.neilmach.me, which is found in Herefordshire near Hay-on-Wye, by the way, which is where the world famous book festival takes place. Arthur's Stone is a chambered tomb, or a dolmen, D-O-L-M-E-N, and that means a chambered tomb but with a single chamber. And it was formerly thought to be as old as Stonehenge, and that's old enough, but this new archaeology suggests it's much older. It means that the area of England we know as rural Herefordshire now, which is just east of the River Wye, and it's a land that's set between the Kingdom of England and the Principality of Wales, was once an area of great, if not significant, spiritual importance to the Stone Age people of these lands, and perhaps it was of spiritual importance to the people across all of Europe. It was possibly even more important than the plains of Wiltshire would become. This Arthur's Stone structure gets its name, by the way, from the legends of King Arthur, who is said to have used this as a landmark. He possibly did use it as a landmark. There's some weird markings in the stones, and local people say that it was where Arthur knelt onto the stone. Several other historical events also took place at this magical stone. A duel between knights during the Wars of the Roses, that was in the 15th century. And in 1645, during the English Civil War, King Charles dined there with his army. So it's very likely that Arthur used this stone as a symbol of power. According to the Mysterious Britain website, Arthur's Stone was also probably the inspiration for C.S. Lewis's Stone Table, and if you remember, that's where Aslan the Lion was sacrificed in the Narnia stories. So there's a link with fantasy fiction. So here's a ceremonial landscape that's found near Tolkien's home in Worcestershire, by the way, that has inspired mythologies that span millennia, and it assimilates along the way Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, Roman and Norse symbolism and myths, as well as adding dream landscapes to hundreds of more legends and stories, like, for example, the story of Narnia. So from the tales of Owen Glendour to King Arthur and his knights, this landscape has nourished creative minds across many centuries, right through to Alfred Lord Tennyson and Phil Rickman, who wrote the Merrily Watkins novels, from Barbara Erskine, who wrote Lady of Hay, through to the poet laureate John Masefield, and from the ley line discoverer Alfred Watkins through to the ingenious mind of Mark Twain. This area has been a magical wellspring of fantasy and of dream thinking. And, here's a thought, what motivated the original architects of Arthur's Stone to build such an extraordinary structure here? Why did they build their monuments here? What enchantments made this land so holy for them? Why was it an area that was worthy of religious veneration? Perhaps we'll never know that, but it's an interesting thought. So how has your landscape influenced you and inspired your writing? Could you boast at least one artistic achievement that is perhaps prompted by or linked to your local natural environment? Let me know. Tweet me at Neilmach, Neilmach, all one word. Why you should be an irresponsible artist. Goof things up a little. Think like a monkey. Have you ever watched a cartload of monkeys? I went to Malaysia. I was lucky enough to go to Malaysia, invited by my daughter and son-in-law in 2019. And while I was there, I visited a monument, and these little inquisitive animals were very much in charge of that area. And we watched them, and it was very, very entertaining. Some of the monkeys were comical, many were very cheeky, a lot were downright rowdy, and they were invariably mischievous, playful, and very exploratory. Monkeys love to experiment and to explore. They experiment and explore to play, not to work. And through this propensity for irrepressible playfulness and their love of unabashed mischief making, they add to their own, and I think their tribe's, wit and ingenuity and resourcefulness. Yes, primates have a natural inclination to play, and it serves their kind very well. However, human beings are reared to behave well, and we need to be sober above all else. We need to be methodical and deliberate in our language, and we need to be measured in our learning and our thinking. They teach us not to ask stupid questions. They teach us not to stick our necks out. They teach us not to have dumb ideas. They teach us not to skylark around. They teach us not to retreat into a wonderland of our own imagination. And they certainly teach us not to create mischief. This homogenization of the free spirit deprives our species of creative thinking. It's an assimilating restraint that interrupts our naturally found and autonomous expression. It's a Puritan prudence, and it stifles our creative brainwork and suppresses our inclination to produce art and to produce science and to produce invention. And this smothering goes on from early childhood, when you're told not to do things, all the way through and into our adult life, where you're told not to misbehave by your teacher or by your boss. It's stifling our playful minds, and it's interrupting our dynamic ingenuity. The authorities, whether they're your parents or your teachers or your work bosses or your king or your governments, are always seeking to end your free play and your capricious thinking, because they don't want you to be like a monkey. Why do we do it? Why do we allow these grey, unremarkable people in their grey, unremarkable suits, with their grey, unremarkable ideas and their grey, unremarkable impulses, stifle the inspiration game? We know, don't we, that influential thinkers from Galileo to Turing to Caravaggio to Chaplin, from Einstein to Kandinsky, all these and many thousands more across the ages have been victimised by the Greys for their alleged indisciplines and their refusal to obey contrived sets of rules that are dictated by a largely uncreative society. What I'm saying here is the ruling classes suppress the playfulness of artists, and I think that's a fact. And of course we know, don't we, that writers continue to be routinely harassed and imprisoned, and they risk physical beatings and even get murdered each year solely because they think differently from those who claim to be in charge. And as a side thought on that, do those grey, unremarkable powers have enough on you? Do those grey, unremarkable powers have enough evidence to crack down on your artistry? Just a side thought there. And I think it's unnatural and artificial to behave well, and to be repressed, and to be clamped down, and to be reserved as a primate. And yet, we are all primates, aren't we? We're not some other type of creature. So why don't we all lark about like a cartload of monkeys? Well, at this stage I could analyse the reasons for regulating and penalising free thought and regulating and penalising artistic expression, and I think it probably has something to do with religious, political or sexual deep-rooted motivations, but I prefer to leave that for another time. And instead I should promote the message that it's not the ones who play who are the perverted ones. Oh no. In this narrative, it's the spiritless and the soulless grey ones who are flawed. They, the ones in charge, are the perverted ones. We, the artists, the ones described as weirdos and eccentrics and crazies, and at best, if it's your friend, they call us, oh, they're the funny characters, or they're the arty-farty ones. We're not the odd ones. We're not the odd ones out. No, in reality, it's everyone else, the so-called ordinary folk, the mediocrities, the bootlickers, the sycophants, the underperforming plutocrats. They're the ones who are genuinely nonconformist. How can I be so sure? Because they are the ones that transgress the rule of our species. Because our species plays and they don't play. Our species is a playful species and they want to stop play. So it's those grey unadventurous people who deviate from the natural impulse of our taxonomy. And our natural impulse as a primate is to play and to be playful and to encourage others to play and to stimulate play through imagination and through being mischievous. And anyone who suppresses those natural impulses to play is atypical. And what I mean by that word is they deviate from the true type of our species. The reason perhaps that the grey world disapproves so much of our play is that our play is voluntary and it's pleasurable and it's self-rewarding. And I often get the feeling that they view play as not entirely serious. Stop looking out the window and watch what you're doing. Do your homework. Don't sketch in your book. Concentrate on doing the maths. What are you doing now? Why are you over there talking to your friends? Come back here and work at the desk. They consider it to be a waste of good time, and they hate it because it doesn't directly and instantly benefit them. And when I say them, I mean the grey, unremarkable people that we work for. As creative artists, I think we need to goof things up a little, and we need to think a little bit more like a monkey. Because benefits of play are widely acknowledged, and they include, and I'll go through a little bit of a list, greater muscular coordination, improved motor skills, strengthened social bonds through interaction, and fast attainment of developmental milestones. And pretend play also improves the primate's ability to cope with unexpected situations, because a positive byproduct of pretend play is a less pronounced physiological response to stress. And play also improves a primate's mental health, and if the play has a physical dimension, it will of course help maintain general fitness. Furthermore, we can associate play with greater cohesion and less aggression and rivalry because it builds on multicultural interactions. Scientists have been conducting studies on play, and they see that when a primate involves itself with informal suck it and see experiments, or messes about with objects, or kids about with tools, or tinkers about with options, or jokes about with pals, or toys with ideas, then those play activities allow the primate to better understand cause and effect, and helps the primate to develop useful artistic and scientific methods. So play is a vital learning mechanism. And the question that you have to answer today is, have you played enough? Have you played enough today? If you'd like to participate in some creative expressivity exercises with me over the next few weeks, then you should follow me on my socials, either at Facebook, which is author.neilmech, Neilmech, all one word, or on Facebook on the Myth Magic podcast, which is Myth Magic without the and in the middle, Myth Magic podcast, all one word. So tune in and you'll help me go through some exercises which I think are going to be playful, and they'll be helping you with your imaginative processes. So good luck with that. Let me know how you're all getting on, and I'll catch you next week.